Welcome back to the Joseph Graham Show. I'm super excited today because I have two amazing guests with me. First, Bob Berg. You might have heard the book The Go Giver, and his friend Jeff West, who they partnered together to do a project we're going to talk about in just a few moments. But guys, first and foremost, thank you for being on the show. I love just getting that chance to talk to you guys, pick your brain, and learn a little bit more about who you are and how you help people.
It's an honor, Joe. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. If one of you want to talk just a little bit about, like, I know we were talking a little bit before the podcast on how you two partnered together. It looks like you have a selling event coming up soon and some different things that you do.
Sure. The way Bob and I met, it's kind of a funny story. I always tell people, and this is the honest, this is right on the money for the timing and everything. In January of 2000, I was a struggling district manager with a Fortune 500 insurance company. I would make my numbers one year, I would miss them the next. I wasn't in danger of getting fired, but I was no superstar. And a mentor of mine, a gentleman named Frank Davies, gave me two books, and it changed my career. The first was a book called 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by Dr. John C. Maxwell. And the second one, I'd never heard of the author. It was a book called Endless Referrals by Bob Berg. And those two books literally changed my career. Over the next 4 years, I went from being a struggling district manager to a state manager for that same company. And at the point where I was a regional manager, I get a phone call in my office one day. My administrator buzzes me and she says, "You've got somebody on the phone named Bob Berg." And I thought somebody was pulling my leg. And the reason I thought that is I had been such a proponent of endless referrals for a good solid 2+ years at this point, telling everybody about it, speaking in front of sales groups and all that. And I thought, I would just, she said it was Bob Berg, I thought, sure, I've got
Yep.
one of my buddies pulling my leg here. That's not really him. And so I get on
Yeah.
the phone, and Bob has this distinctive voice that I didn't know at the time. But he says, "Hi, Jeff, Bob Berg here." And I said, "Sure it is, fella." True story. And he said, "Excuse me?" But he was actually prospecting me for speaking gigs at that point. But it began as Humphrey Bogart said, the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
No, I love that. So you guys connected, and it's funny because books are the power that connects. So you guys connected through the book, and then Bob, you had reached out to him for a speaking engagement. So you guys also have written a book together, have you not? And what was the
We
name of that
have.
book?
Bob, you want to take them?
Yeah. Streetwise to saleswise, become objection proof and beat the sales blues. And it's a business parable. Jeff was the lead writer. He's moved from being an amazing insurance sales practitioner, sales leader of leading thousands of people as a state sales coordinator, to then not only teaching sales, which he does now, but also becoming a parable writer. He's had a couple of best-selling parables already, and then now this third one we did together. So not only was he the lead writer, but a lot of his wisdom is in this book as well. So we collaborated on this one to just kind of look at a topic that we felt salespeople have always had a challenge with, and that is how they often ineffectively handle objections, when you can master that aspect of the sales process or become what Jeff and I call objection proof. Really, you're 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game. You're able to serve more people, serve them better, and earn a whole lot more income.
No, and I love that because as we were talking beforehand, I've been a closer for a Fortune 50 company for a long time. Won President Circle's Award, done all that stuff. But you're right, objections are the biggest thing that a lot of salespeople seem to be afraid of. So I want to talk to you about this a little bit. Why do you think that is that people are afraid of an objection? Because typically, until you get one, the sale hasn't even started.
Well, kind of my role in the mechanics behind what Bob and I do together is talking about what happens in our brain and what makes the buyer say yes, what makes the prospect say yes to the first meeting, things of that nature. Well, when it comes to an objection, what happens in a salesperson's mind, the part of their brain that produces emotion produces a negative emotion. It's a fear of loss. It shoots a somatic marker down into their chest cavity, and it changes the way they feel physiologically. It is It is they get short of breath, they get some anxiety going on. It changes what they're feeling. And when that feeling combines with logic, it creates what I call a collision point. And people naturally push back. A prospect will say no to meeting with you. A prospect will say no to moving forward. But as a salesperson, the intensity that we feel with that creates that fear, and we want to avoid that feeling. And so salespeople, once they get a few objections, they start developing that, and it really eats at them inside. And Bob, for decades, has had some material on becoming objection proof, and it so perfectly teaches salespeople how to change that perspective, and it's just brilliant in my opinion.
Thank you. I just never knew that it had anything to do with collision points, or what Jeff on the positive end calls fusion points, which he actually went back and, before Jeff was a sales leader or sales manager. We always say sales leader. We like that better than sales manager, but he was, an on the street salesperson for this company, and he had an absolutely amazingly high rate of being able to both set appointments and then close. Now, he, much like I did, and as you did, learned how to do that. And that's something that salespeople can learn. But after he retired, he wanted to know, so why? Why did that, really, why did that work so well? And that's where he made a study of this and came up with his, with fusion points, which, if we're fortunate, he'll go into a little bit later and talk about how he discovered that and so forth. But it's really fascinating. And so, it's interesting with objections, because you'd think, it's sort of always been the bane of the salesperson's existence. Yet, when you think about it, every objection you're ever going to hear, I'd say 90%, 95% of all the objections you're ever going to hear, you will hear within your first 4 or 5 sales conversations. Okay. Plus, you learned what they were going to be in basic sales training 101 when you went to work for the company or read a book or what have you. But you're going to know. So you think logically, okay, I know what the objection is going to be, or at least after hearing one, even if it surprises me hearing it once, I know the objection. I have a good response to it. Makes sense. The person's going to buy. Happy days. Yet that is not what usually happens. And a big reason for this in our belief is the way it's framed. And, what is a frame? A frame is the foundation from which everything else evolves. And what salespeople have been taught for eons is you've got to overcome the objection. Well, there's a problem with trying to overcome an objection. You can't do it. You cannot overcome an objection. Why not? Well, in the very root of the word overcome, and remember, Dale Carnegie, what did he teach in his classic How to Win Friends and Influence People? A person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. And is there any other way to be convinced than against one's will? Convince comes from the old root, Latin root convincere, which means conquer. Now, Jeff, myself, Joe, you're an old sales pro, not as old as Jeff and I are, but you're a pro. Have you ever met a prospect who wants to be overcome by their salesperson? Absolutely not. This is where the ego comes in. They're going to hold to their position, whether it's logical or not, right? And so what we want to do, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you were going to say something. I'm sorry. So what we want to do is let's reframe this from trying to overcome an objection to instead working effectively within the objection in order to get to the actual root cause, right? And then partnering with your prospect to work through it and advance the sales process. See, aside from their ego being bruised when you try to overcome the objection, there's one other big thing I left out, and that's this. Often their objection is not their actual objection. I'm not saying they're lying. Okay. I mean, if they are, that's a whole different story. That's a trust issue. You got to go way back to the, no, I'm saying most of the time, they don't really know what their objection is. Because remember, they're not as comfortable with the process as the salesperson is. The salesperson does this every day. But to them, it might be something they do once in a lifetime or twice or 5 times, whatever. They're not. So what happens is because they feel somewhat uncomfortable with something, but they don't know exactly what to ask, what the actual issue is, if they're going to appear ignorant. It's almost like the old comic strip and movie Spider-Man, where he had Spidey sense. Remember, he didn't know exactly what the problem was, but he could sense there was something wrong. So when the prospect does this, they immediately go to just the first thing that comes to their mind, reactionary, which is, your price is too high. I got to think it over. I got to talk to my brother-in-law's best friend's neighbor's second cousin once removed. I've got to think about it. Yeah, I'd like to do it, but not right now. I'd like to do it in a few months or what have you. They don't really know why. So what happens is if we just try to overcome an objection by utilizing the practiced response to every objection, we may do a great job. We may do the smoothest, nicest, best response to the wrong objection.
Mhm.
Right. And that's really where this comes into play.
No, and I love that because I was thinking about just through my sales career. Because when you first start out, you're going to mess up and you're going to try all the tactics and stuff. And finally, I was like, I'm just going to sell how I want to be sold. Totally get that, Bob. You need to think about it. Great. Can I talk to you next Thursday? Diffuse it right there. And all of a sudden, it's like, at least for me in my career, and I do B2B, so it's a little bit longer sales cycle. I'm developing the relationship. It makes it to where they're like, wait a minute, he didn't try to do that. But then I'll be like, but are there any other questions I can answer for you? Normally, once I let them have their objection and then ask them, then they'll tell me more because now they don't feel like I'm trying to push them into it. Has that been your experience, or how do you guys typically handle that type of scenario?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Bob.
No, I was going to say, Jeff, if you want to tell them about the out or the back door, it's like, I think that's what we're
Right.
both probably thinking.
What you described there, Joe, is one of the reasons Bob's framework on becoming objection proof works so well, is because you are taking what could have been handled poorly and been a block to your progress, and you're reframing it, and you're Bob calls it giving them the out or the back door. When you do that, you're taking the pressure off of them, because what you're doing in essence is you're giving them a way to say no, and you're making them comfortable with that. And oddly enough, the reverse actually happens. The easier you make it for them to have that out, the less likely they are to take it anyway. And what happens internally is this process that Bob has on becoming objection proof. And even that particular example right there, they look at you different, because what you've done at that point, instead of having an adversarial relationship, they become your ally. Bob had a great book called Allies into Adversaries into Allies. Everybody should read that book. I think it's still available. I may be wrong, but what you've done is you've actually created a fusion point. You've put them in a situation where their emotional side of their brain generates a positive emotional response. And every decision is made with a combination of logic and emotion. And whatever you're facing at the time, whatever emotion hit, it creates the somatic marker inside your chest. It's either a good result that you want to repeat or a bad result that you don't. That combines with the logic of what you're facing at the time, and it produces a decision. Well, when it's a positive emotional response in the brain combining with that logic, the natural tendency is to say yes, to be more comfortable, to build a bond, to build loyalty. And that's what I call a fusion point. And a fusion point basically is that moment in time when logic and positive emotion merge and ignite, and it creates energy and acceptance and commitment. People get comfortable saying yes. It creates amazing loyalty. If you're leading a sales team, the better you are at creating fusion points, both with your organization and in their career and how they do things, what you'll find is you get the kind of loyalty that makes organizations stand out. You really do. And what you were talking about something a minute ago in the objection process and sales people dreading that. What happens if if people internalize this process of becoming objection proof and they understand that when you shift that and you reframe it, and all of a sudden you're sitting side by side with someone who is now comfortable working with you, what it does is if they get really great at that process, they'll get used to the fact that, hey, this could go in a positive direction, and they won't dread the objections so much anymore because they'll know when that happens, if they do it well, they're going to create a bond with that client.
Here's was my thought with it, because I was training a guy recently on this, and he was afraid of what they said. And I'm like, bro, it's not about you. It's about them. In the sales process, the customer is what you're thinking of. It's if they say no, they're not saying no to you. They're saying no to the product or service because you haven't earned the right to get them to buy that yet. So I always liked the mental aspect of it. And I think that's what changed in my career once I realized it wasn't about me, because if they're saying no, it's like, okay, well, I get that. I said no now, or is it no forever? Where are we at? And just I think treating people human and connecting with them is the key.
Well, very much so. Puts you way ahead of the game. And because so many people don't do that. But really it is understanding that it is about them. Great salesmanship is never about the salesperson. As important as the salesperson is to the process, that's never what it's about. Great salesmanship is never actually about the product or service, as important as those are. That's not what it's about. Great salesmanship is about the other person. It's about the value. It's about trying to add value to another person's life, or I think even more accurately, we could say it's about another person's life being better just because you are part of it. And Jeff has a great thing he says when it comes to value, the term value proposition, which I think really makes this point very well. Jeff, would you share that?
Sure. Thanks, Bob. As well-intentioned as they are, Joe, I think a lot of companies kind of miss the mark when it comes to what their value proposition is, because when you see the results of how they're thinking, it tends to be about things they do that are above and beyond the transaction. They're exchanging a goods or services for remuneration, and that's fine. And they think that everything they do above that is their value proposition. Well, we do this and we do this and we do this and we do this, and it's not something we're charging extra for. But the truth is, that's not my definition of a value proposition. And I really think it's kind of slightly off, because you see, your value proposition has absolutely nothing to do with your company and how great it is, has nothing to do with how wonderful your product or your service is. It doesn't even have anything to do with how great you as a salesperson are. And I know you're great. Your value proposition is actually 100% about how that prospect's life becomes better when they choose to become your client. It's about how their world changes. So when you get down to it, a company value proposition isn't the company's at all. It's the clients. It's their value from your proposition. And if everything you do in your sales process, from prospecting phraseology that you use to the actual sales conversation itself, if your focus with your phrases and with your intent and with your heart is on making sure that they get their value from your proposition, and you're speaking to that, then your whole process becomes so much easier. It really does.
No, I love that. Again, I've always been helping the person first, teaching or doing things that making it 100% about the customer. And like when I've gone into it, a lot of times they don't even see me as a salesperson anymore. They see me as a business owner. I do it on purpose because I want them just to connect with me, but I also don't want them to see me as a salesperson, because it feels like now business owner, salesperson, that it's shifted in a way I don't want it to be. But no, I love that, the aspect of that. Because again, I think we all, as humans, we always think about ourselves and how it affects us. But when we're in the sales world, when we're trying to help people, because I consider selling helping, that's just kind of my thought process on it. We just make it about them, and it's a win.
Right. Well, we're professional matchmakers when you think about it. We have a prospect who has a specific thing that's not going as well as they want it to in their business life or their personal life. And when we care enough and we're focused enough on that person, that we ask questions and we really kind of dive into that and we help them find a solution, what we have on the other end is a company, or ourselves sometimes, that will provide that solution or that product. So we put a prospect together with a company and we get paid for being in the middle. We are truly a professional matchmaker. If you're an entrepreneur, you're getting both sides of that equation, but it's still the same general process. And it's really a great way to make a living if you do it well.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I want to shift here because you both write in parables, and I want to understand the thought process, because when you go to write a book, you can write it any way you want. And I love the parables. I love stories. I've been reading stories since I was a little kid. So I think, what made you guys feel that was the most effective way to get people to realize and connect?
Well, I mean, I think that by the very nature of a parable being a story, it's much more likely to connect with the audience, with the reader. Stories tend to connect on a much deeper heart level. Now, all of my books, aside from the ones I've written with Jeff and the one in the Go Giver series, which I wrote with John David Mann, and again, John David Mann was the lead writer and storyteller. He is absolutely brilliant, as is Jeff. And so, but every book I ever wrote by myself was always a how-to book. I'm more of a how-to writer, and so and I love reading how-to books and also parables, so I mean they all have their time and place. I just think that a parable itself, just by the very nature of the thing, has a much greater chance to connect on a heart to heart level with the reader. And when you make that connection, that's typically when action is more likely to be taken.
It's kind of interesting, Joe, when it comes to my personal writing, my chosen genre is the business parable when it's a nonfiction book. And it's kind of funny because the parable genre straddles that fence, because I love reading and I love writing great fiction. That's it. There's a way that it gets in my system that I totally enjoy. And so that was a natural tendency that I went to in my writing. My first parable I think I read was Og Mandino's The Greatest Salesman in the World.
Mine too.
And
That was
so,
my first business parable that I
yeah,
read. Yeah.
just a great book. And so that's been my natural tendency anyway. And the reason that parables work so well in teaching something goes back to the same reason that when you're in a sales conversation, stories sell. And it's because it goes back to the concept of fusion points that I was talking about. Every decision that we make as a human being is always that combination of logic and emotion. And that's what's going to produce the decision. A parable gives you the chance, as the person trying to make change happen out there for someone, it gives you the chance to touch them emotionally with the fiction. And in most cases, it's a positive emotion that you're generating, making them want to go toward that. Every now and then, you may use a negative emotion intentionally to let them know, no, I don't want to do it that way. And so, but you're taking that emotional center, you're connecting it with the logic of the steps that you're really trying to teach. And that together produces a decision, but it also produces a higher rate of retention and application. And so that's why, to me, that's a really powerful genre to do. I'm actually working on a novel that has nothing to do with sales too, but it's just to feed that fiction buzz in me. But the greatest compliment that I can ever get on a book is that the story itself was so powerful that even if someone wasn't learning something, they weren't willing to put the book down. And when someone calls me a rat and says I couldn't put the book down, and they stayed up late reading, I just smile and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." No, I'm not.
No, I love that. I love that. I think it's just they stand out to me more because I read a lot of nonfiction, and a lot of them
Mhm.
are the how-to books, which are great. I love them. But like the parable ones are the ones that seem to, like you said, draw me in like a regular nonfiction or like a fictional story. And I think it puts you
Mhm.
in that moment. And I think that's as salespeople, and I just kind of want to tie this back. And you said selling is storytelling. We're putting them into an experience at the end of how we're going to help them or how they're going to feel or what. And I know you guys talked a bit about like the scientific aspects of it and the fusion points and all. Is there a way to do that without it? Because I think sometimes people are like they try to do it, but they're not doing it right. So then the customer gets kind of halfway there. How do you help sales professionals craft their story so that they're able to actually connect with their clients instead of leave them on an island. Like you're reading a book, and all of a sudden it goes really bad, and you're like, why did they write this? I hate this book, you know?
Jeff, you might want to take that one. You're the
Okay.
storyteller.
Well, how how I would coach someone in that situation, Joe, I would say, first off, as you're thinking about this, let's focus on their value proposition. How is their world going to change? How is that going to fit into this scenario? And then your story should help them take that journey. So when you are, I'll give you an example. When I was in the insurance industry, it was employee benefit related. And so I sometimes would have 50 or 100 employees in a room, and I'd be doing an insurance meeting. And we all know how everybody looks forward to going to those insurance meetings. And they're so interesting, so entertaining. But what I would do is I was part of what I delivered because I would play with people, and I would say some funny things here and there. But one of the things I did in a story was I would have one of the employees come up front, and I had these big party $100 bills, those really exaggerated $100 bills. And the particular product that we sold was one that it paid the employee additional money if they were missing work because they were sick or hurt, or maybe their spouse or child was sick or hurt. But it gave them extra money that they didn't have to give to the doctor. It was their money. They could do with it what they wanted to. And to get that point across, I would have somebody come up and that would stand there, and I would say, now, everybody loves Joe. Nobody wants Joe to get hurt, but let's talk about a story where Joe's at home. He's changing the Christmas lights. He falls off a ladder. He breaks his leg. Everybody go, ugh, and I'd get the whole room to go, ugh, with me. And then I say, well, here's what would happen if Joe was working with our company. And I would just go through the policy. And every time they had a benefit, I would put another $100 bill in their hand. When I got through, they were getting, $3,000 or $4,000, whatever it was. And I said, now remember, the health insurance is paying the medical bills, but this is money in Joe's hands. And when I would say, now I've got some friends who are really tacky, and I'd get them laughing. I said, yeah, that's okay. See what Joe's holding right now? That's with us. And then I pulled it out of Joe's hands, and I pulled it behind my back and said, this is without us. Which way do you want? But I would play with people. But that story, as I would go through each thing, like they had an ambulance trip or whatever, I just took them mentally through the story. When I started doing that, my closing ratio, I had a lot of groups that we had every single employee in there that had something. And the 100% closing ratio is kind of insane, but I had groups like that. But so and what the story did, it touched that emotional side. It connected it with the logic of what they needed, and the pricing wasn't an issue. So it's a piece of cake.
When I found, and I love that, and I find that really pricing is just the fake objection. Because if you bring enough value or enough product and service for what they need, people will pay for it. It's just they have to value what you're bringing. So no, I love that a lot. Now you guys have an event. I think we were talking about before, and you have an event coming up. Do you guys want to speak to that a little bit and how people can connect with you on it?
Well, so by the time that this airs, we had an event a while back. Depending upon when this airs, we have an event coming up. And it's called SalesWise Live. It's really a sales mastery event, if you will. It's 2 full days where it's Jeff's teaching, where it's Kim Angeli, who does a beautiful program on how to really be able to positively leverage the relationships you have with your current clients in order to remain Actually, here's what she says. One of my favorite quotes. I love when she says it. She says, it's not your client's job to remember you. It's your job to be unforgettable. And that's what really she teaches. And then we have a guest speaker. His name is Richard Weilman, who is for 30 years, this guy his client list is like looking at the Fortune 100. I mean, he's just an amazing guy, and he talks about how to create such an amazing experience with your clients that you turn prospects into customers and clients, and your customers and clients into delighted advocates for your business. We might even call them personal walking ambassadors. So
Nice.
it's 2 full days of that, and, I'll be going through the Go-Giver system as well as the endless referral system. Jeff's gonna take through fusion points, how they work in the prospecting process, in the sales conversation process, and for when you're leading a team of others. And the cool thing about it, I think, really is that it's not just us on stage speaking, but we're also actually interacting with everybody throughout the entire process. So there's lots of breakout groups, there's lots of conversation back and forth. So just a lot of fun, and really it's helping a person to take the people who attend are usually already successful, and they just want to bring their business to that next level of success. Or, there's a sales manager who wants to create a fusion point with his or her uh, salespeople at a beautiful hotel in West Palm Beach, right on the Intercoastal across from Palm Beach Island. So it's really cool.
Oh, very nice. So we'll make it happen. So this is out before then. When are the dates for that?
September 22nd through the 24th is the one after this. We've got one that actually, as a matter of fact, when we get off this podcast, I'm finishing up last minute details in Texas because on Saturday I fly to West Palm and we're doing one starting Sunday night. But the next one will be in September. The details can be found at saleswiselive.com. Saleswiselive, all being one word.com. And the good details there. And then, of course, information on the book would be at streetwise2saleswise.com. And by the way, my favorite part of the book, though, of Streetwise to Saleswise, my favorite part of the title is the subtitle. The story itself is set in New Orleans. Music plays a heavy theme in the process. It's just we use the geography and the character of New Orleans to create almost an entire new character in the book. But it's streetwise to saleswise, become objection proof and beat the sales blues. And blues plays heavily in there. So, but
Nice.
that's streetwise to saleswise.com for that.
No, I love that. I do. I love that. Before I let you guys go, I know you both have a ton of wisdom that you can leave. So I want you both to answer this question. What would be the one or two top things you would tell either a starting sales professional or entrepreneur would be the key for them to level up in their sales world? And Jeff, if you want to go first.
Okay. First thing I tell every new salesperson that I've ever been around is this: you can't expect a six-figure income on minimum wage effort. You've got to be willing to, but you've got to be willing to put the time in to get good. You got to be willing to be bad until you get good, but work very hard on your craft while you're doing that. And the other one is just simply you stay focused on the other person. You help them get what they need. And then you go out there and I had an old sales mentor of mine that says, look, the secret to sales is you go out and you see lots and lots of people and you be really, really nice. And there's a lot of truth in that. So go work hard and be nice to people.
I love that. I love that. And Bob, if you could give us your words too, that's awesome.
Yeah, I remember when an old drive-by mentor of mine about 40 years ago, drive-by because I think it was the only conversation I ever had with this person, but I was lucky that we had this conversation. He said to me, Berg, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Now, when you hit the target, he continued, you'll get a reward. And that reward will come in the form of money, and you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget, he said, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It's not the target itself. Your target is serving others.
I love it. Jeff and Bob, I appreciate you both being on this show. For all you listening, go check out their stuff. Bob's book, The Go Giver, I've given away at least 10 times. I'm going to be getting your other books together because I'm super excited about it. But yeah, go put the work in, put the time in, fail forward, learn, grow, and just help people. And at the end of the day, you'll win. And until next time, have a great day.